It's the Spill of Wine podcast with your host, Leroy Wine Guy Guilford. This show we are visiting, with the other wine guy of Southern California, and more with him and his wines in a moment. You know, this is Spill the Wine Show podcast number 2, and I'm thinking some of you may be hearing it for the first time or going, what gives? Why another podcast? Well, since 2004, I've hosted a wine talk show here in Southern California called Wine Country Talk Radio on Commercial Talk Radio, and served for several good years as the wine commentator for the Dining Guru of Southern California, on the Dining with Peter Dills show, which hits all of California's Southline every Sunday evening at 5 p.m. on the Angels baseball flagship station at AM 830 KLAA. And I've myself been a industry veteran of the Temecula Valley, sold their wines throughout the valley for a good 10 years. And the last 10 years, hanging out with one of the best winemakers and farmers of the whole Southern California area, at least in my opinion, Mr. Steve Chapin. So this podcast literally came about as people kept saying to me, you ought to do a podcast. So here we are. And this particular time around, we're coming to you from the beautiful Carlsbad on the Pacific Ocean. In the new Monarch Studios built and engineered by Roland Guilford. So yes, there is a connection. So this is an extension of what I love to do. What is that? Drink wine and tell stories about it. So last week, esoteric element to it, because we were talking with a gentleman who just jumped in with the farming, the making, and the whole venture of getting his winery starting. I thought this week, let's do something a little more practical in the immediate enjoyment realm, and that is wines you can find easily and enjoy at a moderate price and pretty much everywhere. Now, we're looking primarily here in Southern California, but these are wines that could be found all over, wherever you're listening from. So my guest, is a guy from the grocery outlet chain here in Southern California, which features phenomenal wine sections. And he's specifically, the Long Beach store, has his own, following and a newsletter. And he just happens to be known as Steve Guilford, the wine guy. So we got a little family circle going on here on this time around. Anyways, we're going to taste some wines and talk about some incredible things and finds that he does. So Steve, jump in, talk about a little of your background and especially how you ended up being a wine buyer for a great chain of stores here in Southern California.
Well, thanks, Leroy. I was thinking we could just be the wine bros today instead of, two wine guys. Hello, two wine guys. That sounds pretty good too. Anyway, for me, it all started about 5 years ago. I was driving black car for Uber, and I was going up and down 7th Street. I was in drastic need before heading home of some coffee pods, for my Keurig. And I had driven by that place half a dozen times since it had opened after the Fresh and Easy had been gone for about a year, and thought, oh gosh, another grocery chain I never heard of type of thing. And I thought, well, I'm going to stop in there. They got to have coffee,
Right.
So I went in there, and as I walked in the front door, there was a whole pallet of Folgers black silk coffee pods, and they're, at like $4 and something for, the big 18 or 24 case of pods. And I'm like, wait a minute, this cannot be right. Well, it was right. It was stuff that was, fairly close to expiration date, and they were blowing out tons of it. I ended up going back there again a couple of weeks later and buying the rest of what was on that pallet at like, $1.50 a box or something.
So coffee's going to lead you to wine.
And so anyway, I was in line or getting in line to go pay for my coffee. And there was a fairly long line, and I heard them call for a checker, but, they're waiting for somebody to come up there. And I happened to be standing there looking around, and I saw the big wine sign hanging over the wine section over in the corner on the other side of the store from where I'd grabbed the coffee. And I thought, well, what the heck? I'm going to go over there and take a look. My expectation was pick and save 99-cent store. I thought,
Right.
This discount.
It's like, oh my gosh, did they really put this on the shelf?
And
kind of thing, right?
So I walked over there and I started looking along the wall, and I thought, okay, something's haywire here. I started seeing a number of labels that I recognized there, because from time to time they have quite a few named labels that you will find in all of the other major wine stores. and many that are second labeled of famous wines that you pay a lot more at the other stores.
Yes.
Anyway, I thought, well, what the heck? So I grabbed a few bottles of wine thinking, all right, $5 here, $4 there. I'll even try one of these $6 ones, which in my experience over the years going to the cost plus type places or 99 cents or dollar stores and stuff like that, you find wines in there, and sometimes you pick one up and you look at it and think, oh, this might be really something. You buy a whole bunch of them, and maybe one of them is drinkable, and
Yes.
and another one is like, okay, not too bad, but for the most part, it was mostly hit and miss.
Well, I have to
this
interject
was
because
different.
any of us that drink wine every day, or at least have some with dinner and so on, we know that there's a lot of wines out there that we would love to drink every day, and they're usually a little more expensive. And it's like, well, I want something I can just enjoy every day. So we take that gamble. So today we're going to actually try to take some of that rolling of the dice away from you folks, because we've got some suggestions here that have already been true tested. So pick back up. Now you have some wine experience out of the background. Yes, he is my brother. And it's funny because you preceded me in the enjoyment of wine. And that goes back, in the early 90s or late 80s, was it not?
Well, maybe for you to start. I mean, for
No,
me,
I was much later than that. I was like in the late
me,
90s. So
when I got my first, big corporate job with Honeywell Photographic Products, and I was a salesman traveling around Southern California, and so whenever any of the salesmen would get together, or whenever we would have a gathering or some kind of a company, sharing function, we'd always end up at a restaurant or hotel or whatever, and it just seemed natural, with dinner, like, well, does anybody want to order some wine? And so
right.
That's where I first started. I think it was with Matus Rosé was the first thing I really, took a liking to.
I started, this was in the middle 90s with my kids. I used to cook a lot because my wife's schedule was such that I'd be at home more than she was. And I started cooking with wine. I loved it, except for it was like, the store-bought Chablis in the box or Rosé in the box, because, the old signs you see in places where it says, hey, I cook with wine, and sometimes it even ends up in the food. With me, it was kind of the other way around, and I started sipping a little more as I went along. Next thing I knew, oh my gosh, there's something here I've been missing. So
yes, and then we all discovered Gallo Hardy Burgundy, and our lives started changing as we started
big
drinking.
1 gallon jugs, right?
And we thought that was big red wine, and it really was a leap from many of the things we had been buying. Liquor Barn, which was the big like nowadays we have Bevmo and Total Wines and those. Back then we had Liquor Barn, and was actually the only place among those back then that was importing a lot of the French wines too. And this is at the time, right, when the if you've seen the movie Bottle Shock, you know the story about.
And we highly recommend that, folks, if you have not seen it. It's a fun movie.
And that international competition between the French and the Californian wines, which was really pretty amazing back in 1976. But anyway, that was part of what led to the interest, at the time for me, into looking into, wow, were they so assured that the French would, be killing us, and then the California wines, won 2 years, or not 2 years in a row, but
it's the sip heard around the world, literally, back in 1976. Changed the wine world forever, much to the chagrin of the French, So.
Well, and as and as Chris Pine says in the movie, he says, back in the old days, it was just all us, hippies drinking our wine up here in the Napa Valley. He goes, until, the French, what was the official name they gave it? Can't even think of it off the top of my head. I'll think of it later. And
it'll come to it, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But anyway.
We need another sip of wine is what it is,
everything.
when you do
well,
this.
that brings me back to
us.
where we were a few minutes ago, and I was talking about, going to the discount stores. But anyway, I grabbed a few of the bottles off the shelf there at some of those lower priced wines and took them home, and without too much expectation, opened the bottles and found I had bought 4, not only drinkable, but absolutely terrific for the price wines. I mean, they weren't the greatest thing I'd ever tasted, but they were better than what I could get for $7 at the grocery store on sale, and I paid $4. And I'm thinking, I could buy twice as many of these roughly. And really, in reality, you can. And then I was lucky enough that it was just a couple of weeks before the semi-annual wine sale that Grocery Outlet does in the first week of April and first week of November, where they have 20% off of what's already 30 to 70%
Right,
off of the
right.
retail price. And so I filled up a whole box. And
Now,
I
let me
think
throw in
all
there,
but
'cause-
one, all
Oh,
but
yeah?
one of those was consumed completely, and the other one I gave to a neighbor who was very much, begging for, well, you taste these, can I get some? I said, well, here's one. And it wasn't one I particularly liked. He loved it, so.
Well, now you've started a newsletter. Let's talk a little bit about that, because we're going to leap
Well,
into some of these
all
wines
right.
we're going to
I
taste and
came-
talk about.
I
Okay.
ended up a couple of months later at the kid that was doing the wine buying and merchandising in the store. I was in there one day
This
to
is
buy
circa
some
what
wine.
year?
This is 2017.
2017.
And
Okay. Mhm.
this is long after all my years with Orange County Wine Society and doing all the tastings and pouring and working with you at the wine tastings in Temecula. And
Right.
we did a lot of different things. But anyway, the he calls me over and he says, hey, he goes, I haven't told him yet, but when I clock out tonight, I'm giving him 2 weeks notice. Me and my wife are going to move to Minnesota. And he goes, I think you'd be the perfect person to take over here. He goes,
Right place, right time.
well, I'd been helping him out and telling him about some of the wines that I had enjoyed, and he didn't really know much of anything about wine, so he told me to talk to them. I did. I'll shorten this up with I ended up going to work for them and was employed there for a couple of years and had started the newsletter back then, but I had left the grocery business and some of the politics and people, and just all these kind of things.
Right,
I was getting
right.
too old.
Since
for all
I'm a
that kind of
40-year
stuff.
veteran,
And,
retired by
yeah,
10
and
years,
it's-
I know what
and-
you're talking
and I-
about.
And I
Yes.
left, and that was that. And a few months later, a new owner took over there at the store and called me and asked if I'd be interested in possibly doing a consulting thing and continuing to put out the newsletter and at least give guidance that they could put on the shelf with tags for people to pick out the wines. And so I started doing that. And since then, I have about 350 regular readers of my newsletter that I put out. And when I left there from the original, I think I had about 120. So in the last 2 years now, coming back to this store, I'm up to about 350. And usually within the first 2 days, I have a 55% open rate on that newsletter. And then over the following 7 to 10 days, it'll end up getting up close to 70%, which
Now,
is
here's
pretty
why,
doggone
folks,
good.
okay, because this is what we're going to do right now, especially if you're out here listening, with a Southern California perspective, and that could be, when I say Southern California, everything from Ventura south down to San Diego. You have a number of stores in your chain that are scattered all throughout Southern California. They are all independently owned, so they don't all have equal wine shops sections in their stores. However, they all have pretty much available in queues about which are the better ones. So I want to talk about your newsletter and your recommends, because folks could find their local grocery outlet or any other retailer of wines that carries a reasonable selection and find some stuff you don't have to feel like you rolled the dice on. Yeah, this stuff you can enjoy with dinner or just sitting back and sipping and you're not breaking the bank, okay? I mean, I work for a winery that makes incredible wines, Chapin Family Vineyards, but yeah, we're, $50, $60 a bottle, and I'm not going to drink that every night at dinner. I do want to take it to dinner, so... All right, so let's talk about the newsletter now. And I love the way it starts out. Talk about your little quote there, your fermented friends. Is that what you, something like that?
My friends of the fermented grape.
Yes.
That
That makes it even funnier. Some of us might think of we're fermented friends, right?
Well, yeah, I guess.
But we're not exactly spring chickens in this room, so yes.
Well,
What the engineer
yeah,
accepted,
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
So,
there you go.
yeah.
Well,
All right.
anyway,
By the way, the radio thing in me is still hard to get out. So this is the brand new podcast, Spill the Wine. Yeah, there's an old song from way back when I graduated from high school that I love. Doesn't talk really much about wine in that, but it's got a great line. And so we're spilling.
And who sang that song?
And now that's when Eric Burden left the Animals and created the band War that went on to their own thing.
All right.
So
Of
Yes.
course, you would know
But,
that. People,
of course
if
I would.
people
So,
don't
but-
already know, you're the rock and roll historian. If ever you get
I
a
have
chance
literally
to get
thousands
into
of
that, so.
CDs and vinyl LPs all categorized at home. So, okay. Now, we are going to definitely do this. We're going to talk through some of these. But yeah, this is Leroy Guilford, your host, and the Spill the Wine podcast. We're going to be putting out there every week all the different dimensions of everything that has to do with wine and its enjoyment. And in this time around, the practicality of just snatching up a reasonably priced bottle. Let's hit your newsletter, Steve.
Well, the newsletter that I put out just this last Sunday, which has gotten a tremendous amount of feedback and a lot of requests for video follow-up and things of that nature, featured I think I had about a dozen different wines in there that I talked about that over the last, I had skipped a month. I had a lot of things going on. Didn't do a newsletter last month. Normally I do it every month.
But
Sometimes
that's like a
more
podcast.
often.
You do it when you have the time, right?
Well,
So-
I try to do it at least once a month, and then I do it several times during the wine sale period, the week before and during the week of in April and November, because new things come in and people come in and buy sometimes 4 and 5 and 6 and 8 cases of mixed, various wines when they're buying things that might have been, and in this, many times, like we had some high-end acacia wines that were $60 and $70 retail price, and we were selling them for $10 and $12. You can afford to stock a few of those in your
Yes.
closet.
Now, I'm going to jump
and
ahead.
hang
We're
on
going to
them.
taste through some things here, but since
let
you
me bring
mentioned
up
that,
those.
the Xanthos, which I keep finding myself going back and
I
sipping.
see that all the time. I
Okay.
see that.
That's the fun thing about doing this, folks. You could drink the wine while you're talking about
Well,
it, okay?
I was
So-
just going to mention that since I featured
yeah.
about a dozen of them in the newsletter, I picked
Okay.
4 of them to bring along today. I brought 2 slightly lighter styled in the Wolfgang Puck Pinot Noir and the Michel Schlumberger Bon Mott, which is not the most expensive of the 3 that I recommended of theirs, but it is probably the most approachable for all the different people who might buy it. And then a pair of cabs with our #1 best-selling wine label at Grocery Outlet, which is Provenera Reserve Wines.
Right.
And we have a Cab, a Zin, a Chardonnay, and a Pinot Noir, all of which are terrific. Every single vintage, I don't know how they make such excellent wine that we sell for $6 and $7 a
Now,
bottle.
you catch
And
that,
lastly,
folks? $6 and $7 a bottle,
Yeah.
and you'll be blown away
for
many
retail,
times by the
22,
quality of these
yeah,
wines.
These are $23 type bottles of wine. And in the case of Provenera, there are a few other stores you can buy it at.
Right,
Bevmo, it's going to be closer to $20 than $7. But and then I brought you a headliner in this 2019 Xanthos. It's a cab from Oakville, which is in Napa Valley. They only produce 3,600 cases of this wine. It's a 15% alcohol with beautiful, smooth, lasting tannins, as you are already discovering. As we have 4 wines poured in the glasses. He keeps sneaking back over to that one. So anyway, I have the
Well,
2
you need
lighters.
a little libations to
Yeah.
keep a wine talk show going. So wait, before we do the things that we have in the glasses here,
Okay.
we're going to sip a little bit and talk specifically about them. Talk about some of the wines that we don't have here that are in your newsletter and some of the price points. Just some general stuff, okay?
Well, I try to cover a little bit of everything, from different perspectives of types of wine as well as different price points. Now, we carry, whenever it's available and they have enough quantity, we have a deal with Roblar, and we have it's not their same label as you're buying in the winery, because these all say
Right.
of California on the label. That's how they differentiate them. And when there's excess or the stuff that isn't, with their featured wines, but we're allowed to sell them there for, $6 and $7 and $8, the same, or very close to the same wines that you're paying $20-some for or $35 for at the winery. And we don't always have them. Right now we
Right,
have the Syrah, the
Well, everything
2018
cycles
Syrah.
through, right? Which is why
Yeah.
they need to watch your newsletter.
And
Yeah.
these things come and go. Also, that I didn't bring, the Noble Tree 2016 Russian River Valley Old Vine Zin is
Ooh,
different, but it's a beautiful bottle of wine.
And that one,
And-
and keep
and
keep
it's
saying
only-
the price points on these
Yes,
too.
and
So.
in this case, we're talking only $8. It's
Wow.
$7.99 a wine. And then Zinfinity at $11 in our store probably drinks like a $30 Old Vine Zin, and we have not a whole lot of it left, but probably a couple of months worth. And then I have a really high-end Russian River if you like the drier Sonoma Russian River Valley type Pinot Noirs, the Fritz that we have available there for $11.
Oh, I love the name, the Fritz.
Is it $10 or $11?
Wow.
It's yeah. I'm drawing a blank on it for the moment. That one is either $10 or $15. But anyway,
Right.
you won't be distracted
Disappointed.
at either price
Right.
point. Yeah,
Yes. In other words,
like,
you're getting your bucks worth.
if you were
Right.
going to a restaurant and you ordered a bottle of wine for $85 and they served you this, you'd all be smiling and saying, "Wow, this is really nice. Should we get another one?" So, and the Rockwell Tannat, there's not enough of it left for me to have brought it here because.
Oh my gosh! And that's a grape that we're growing at Chapin Family Vineyards
Yes,
now too, which
I know
is
it
amazing.
is, and I have
Yes.
brought a bottle of it along to bring to your owner and winemaker, just so he's got something to see that I found that we thought was really terrific. And since the newsletter came out on Sunday night, the little bit of stock that I had left was down to just a few bottles
yes,
when I
yes.
grabbed this one yesterday. So I don't know if that'll still be there, but you
No,
asked
we're not-
what were
we're-
some of the others. So.
We're not stopping at this point, but throw out what's the source point for getting a line on your newsletter, and then we'll continue forward.
Well, unlike, I imagine all of the other stores, but maybe not all, but most of, I taste every one of these wines that come in. I mean, it's just kind of part of the job. Some people laugh when I say that's part of my job. But
when I'm at the winery and I open it up, I tell people all the time, I said, I have this terrible job when I get here in the morning. I have to taste all the wines and make sure they're servable that day because, red wines, they will tend to go down after they've been open a day or two.
I try not to taste them first thing in the morning,
yes.
but I tend to have a little duller day if I drink anything in the morning. But, other things that were mentioned, one of them already ran out yesterday, which is the Purple Heart Cabernet, which is one of Michael Mondavi's. He's the grandson of the original founder of the Mondavi wineries. And we've got
As a matter of fact, Michael sold his oak big aging tanks to a guest I had on a couple of weeks ago, at least on Peter's show. And that's William Christopher Sellers. And we're going to do a long form with him, by the way, just a tease for coming up here in the next 2 weeks. He's a rodeo cowboy. Yeah, a medal-winning rodeo cowboy turned winemaker, but that's another time there. Okay, so those are the ones that you didn't bring, right? And,
well, that's most of them
right?
anyway. I still mentioned 3 or 4 others. I had a Portuguese red blend in there. If anybody's interested, in a little bit I'll give you the information if you'd like to sign up for my monthly newsletter.
Go for it.
If you just want to know what
yeah.
these wines are, or if you have a grocery outlet within driving distance of you, you might want to go try some of these. There are, like I said, sometimes name brand wines. There was one other one I mentioned in there, which was the 19 Crimes Chardonnay. Everybody's familiar with the 19
Crimes
label.
is all over the place. Sure.
But this particular one, they source grapes from and juice from all over the place. But in this case, it's a southeastern Australian Chardonnay.
Wow.
It's absolutely awesome, and it's in a beautiful twist top aluminum can.
Oh, that sounds fascinating.
That's a half
Give it a
bottle
little
size,
distinct
half bottle
element.
size.
Yeah.
And at $2.99, that makes it about $1.50 a glass, and it's absolutely delicious, awesomely good Chardonnay.
Well, now let's go to the wines we did bring along. And
right.
as we're just saying, folks,
Let's go to
what,
Wolfgang
did you
Puck
wind
for
up telling
starters.
them how to sign up for the newsletter, though? How do
I
they
didn't
do
yet.
that?
Well, I can do that now and do it again
that
later,
now.
I
We'll
guess.
do it a couple times.
If you send your name to vipwinelist@gmail.com, just in the subject line, just put wine list and put in your first and last name, and I'll add you to the list and immediately send you the most recent copy of the newsletter so you can make sure that you got signed up correctly. If you don't receive one in 2 to 3 days, then you may want to try it again. Maybe you misspelled it, typed it in wrong or something.
And I have to say, because those of us that love to enjoy wine, especially for those that like to enjoy it daily and are looking for things that are, good quality but reasonable in price, to have somebody that's tasting them up, and like every personality relative to anything, and in this case, we're talking about wines, as you get to know that personality, in this case, myself or my brother Stephen there, you get to know what their kind of passion and flavor is. You can read that newsletter and have some trust factor for what you get to know. I mean, to not have to roll the dice on inexpensive wines and know you'll take something home worth pouring. And then on top of that, going, oh my gosh, I didn't know I could get this for that, Okay, so we have a couple of really yummy red wines that we brought so we can actually sip through them. And let's start with the first of those. So, yeah, everybody knows this name, Wolfgang Puck, right? So, what did you guys just recently picked that up, or is that something you do for some time now?
Well, as you know, we get deals on wines for Grocery Outlet's been doing this since 1946, so it's like 60 years of becoming an entity
Right.
in the Northern California climes. I mean, they're based in Early Game, just outside of Berkeley, and they're pretty familiar with all of the big wineries, the big wine makers, and the big juice brokers, which is the main
Right.
thing you got to be if you want to be able to do bulk deals, when wines come about. We all know that there are gluts on some years and shortages in other
Right.
years, and fires and weather and
Yeah.
storms. There are all kinds of things can change it around, like what's going on in France now is going to
Right.
probably bump
Yeah.
the prices up on anything from there. So they make deals, and occasionally we get things with big names that we're selling for $10 that we're retailing for 50, 60, 70, sometimes even more than that. When the Vietnamese owners of geez, I'm drawing a blank on it. Well, you have to kill
That's
that
right.
out there.
You have to sip a little more wine to help that come about. So
Well,
let's
anyway,
talk about the
they
Wolfgang
had
Puck label
sold
here.
when they
Yeah.
sold off the winery and moved
Yeah.
back with all of their expertise to go make wines overseas. All of what was left at the winery, we got a lot of wine, their library wines, which were as high as $100 being sold as library
Right.
wines online. And the highest we got for any of those was $25, and most of them were at $16 to $20 that we sold those $80 and $100 library wines, many of which were pretty incredible ones. Those were the ones that they really figured out how to do it, and so they put the small quantity away.
Well, I
and
want
that
to go
was
back.
left
Let's
over.
talk about specifically the Wolfgang
All
Puck
right.
and take a sip here. Okay?
I don't know the
So-
circumstances on
Right.
how this particular deal was made. It's
Right.
very possible it was like during this last year when we bought lots of wines. We were able to source some pretty incredible stuff at great deals from a number of the airlines and a number of the cruise lines who were not sailing and not flying during the pandemic. And they had ordered and they get delivered all of this wine, and they had not much.
It costs
they can
money
do
to
with it.
store it if you're not
That's
moving
correct.
it. That's
and they,
right.
And they,
So, yeah.
and they don't have the appropriate storage facilities. So, Grocery Outlet was able to buy a whole lot of some incredibly good Pinot Noirs that we sold for $4.99 a bottle. The Wolfgang Puck, I don't know what the circumstances were, but it's here at only $7 and change in our store. And this is if those of you that are familiar with the Vivino app, where consumers can rate wines and give opinions and give ratings on them, it's pulling a 4.3. And those of you that have ever used Vivino know that means run down and buy it. And
Now, I have to tell you, I
4.3
am
at that
not a
price point
giant.
is unbelievable.
I'm not a giant Pinot Noir fan. I like wines with a little more guts, but when it's made right, and I just splashed me a little more here, folks. I am. Oh,
There you
this
go.
has got some guts.
I thought you'd enjoy it.
Very smooth. One of the things that you look for, especially if we're talking about wines that are of lesser price point, is are they going to be balanced around? They're not going to have all kinds of weird things going on, like the stuff you find in the closeouts at the lesser places that we've mentioned in the past. So this one that is selling for $7 a bottle. That's correct.
It's
Or
$7 or
roughly
$7.99,
thereabouts,
yes.
yeah.
And
So Pinot Noir fans, Wolfgang Puck Pinot Noir. What vintage is that, Steve?
this one is a 2015, and this one is a 13.5%, which is pretty much the
That's
sweet
right, yeah.
spot for Pinot Noirs. I like them definitely in the 13 range. I've had a
Right.
few that have been over 14, but that's pretty hard to do with the
Well, the
lighter
average drinker,
grape.
that's going to be either more pizzazz or less pizzazz. Okay,
And if
when
they
we're
go
talking
below
about alcohol
13,
by volume,
if they go below 13%, they tend
then
to
they're pretty
become
thin.
fruit-forward,
Yeah.
bombs that aren't near as good as for a dinner wine. This would be a great one to bring along to another restaurant besides Wolfgang Puck's. If you're going to pay a $10 corkage fee, that'd be a fun one to bring along.
All right, let's jump ahead to
Secondarily-
Michelle because
Okay.
this I love. So say the last name
It's
because it looks like burger on the end, but it's not correct there. What is that?
It's a French
It's a-
name, Schlumberger. So
Schlumberger. I love the sound of that. Schlumberger.
Michel Schlumberger.
Yeah.
So the
And, that's out of Napa
over the
area,
years,
right?
Over
Hillsburg?
what's that? Well, that's Hillsburg.
Hillsburg,
which is
right.
yeah,
Which
southern
is
Napa
close
County.
in. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Actually, a lot of my favorite wines over the years have come out of Healdsburg, and
uh-huh.
all of the Gallo of Sonoma, when they were making their varietal labels, and were doing pretty well with it out of Healdsburg.
So
That's
this say it again. I got to get it here.
Michelle Schlumberger.
Schlumberger. Okay, so the Schlumberger, we're going to take a sip of that.
Yeah, these are not not signed by individual winemakers. There's no real data on the sourcing of the grapes. I know that they're being bottled there in Healdsburg, but I don't know what are the circumstances on the different wines. We've had so many different labels and varietal blends.
Okay, what is the
them.
blend in this particular
In this
one?
case, it's something different that we haven't seen before.
And it comes through.
This is a 60% Syrah and 40% Zinfandel.
And you can get both of those varietals. If you get familiar with the flavor patterns of different wines, folks, then yeah, we become like sommeliers where we try to pick the things out. I'm sorry, I'm not a sommelier. I like to tease. I know a lot of sommeliers. I hate to take tests. I'm glad they do. And when I want to know what they know, I just invite them on to, say, here, we're going to play Stump the Sommelier. Okay, so, but anyways, you can really taste the Zin as well as the Syrah. It's got an earthy kick to it as well.
One of the things that all the customers seem to appreciate that I do the newsletter for, I don't write like a sommelier. I write like a consumer of wine.
Right, and that's what we're talking
and
to.
I talk in terms of how it pleases or thrills me or gives me orgasmic feelings. It's like I want to know, what am I getting for my money? Whether I taste chocolate and cardboard and tobacco blended together, and if that's what gives me this beautiful, taste on my tongue and a beautiful smooth finish, then that's the one that I want. I don't really...
Well, I have to tell you, when you look at the label, and I made this mistake when you first started pulling them out, I went, oh, French wine, because one, the name, and two, it's a very kind of traditional label.
Yes.
And you look closer, and it says 2019 California I'm going to say Bon Mot?
Bon Mot, yeah.
Bon Mot, okay, and then it tells you what the blend is. This, folks, is, wow, yummy, and it's not a heavy body wine at
that's
all.
why I paired it
lots
with
of
this
flavor.
Pinot Noir. Anyway, from Schlumberger over the years, we've always had their basic red blend, their Rouge. They do a lot of French naming in there as well. But we've had a number of different wines, and recently we got these three in with the Amat Rouge, the Bon Mot, and the Faux Pas, all three of which I mentioned in the newsletter last Sunday. I brought this one because it's one of the $6.99 rather than the $9.99 like the Amat Rouge.
If you're a Syrah fan, folks, or even a Zin fan, because both of these come through,
at the price,
I'd run out and snatch up these bottles because I know I'm going to do that.
You can't touch anything like that.
This is super good. This is a great every night at dinner wine, easy. Okay, for $7-8. So $7 or $8, that is. Let's dive forward, looking. Because this is a Cabernet and a line of a brand name that is consistent at the price point you guys have. So let's talk about that. The Provenera.
Yeah, the Provenera
And you can find
Reserve,
that lots of places besides with Grocery Outlet, right?
Well, that is our flagship label.
Oh, it is your flagship. So this is premium to them, folks.
Yeah, and we're not the only ones. I have people come in and tell me they have seen some of our bottles at Bevmo, and I don't know about Total Wines, but I've had a number of people come in and tell me, yeah, they were in a pinch and went over and paid $18 or $19 for it at Bevmo, and then they come back to me and they're like, fill up my box, I don't want to run out again. Anyway, this is the 2019 Cabernet Reserve. Provenera is a Napa Valley-based winery. I don't know who the individual winemakers are and whether they are consistent across vintage to vintage. This particular
Well, we're talking about the bottle that folks can buy right now.
The 2019 and some of the 2018 is still available in our store as well. We have still had cases of that around when we ordered more, and suddenly it came in the 2019.
Well, let's take a sip.
The difference being the 2019 has the gold foil neck, and the 2018 has the black foil neck. So you can't.
I have to tell you, okay, on the first sip.
But this,
you could blindfold me. I couldn't know a thing, and I could tell you right now, this is Cabernet, folks.
Yes.
Because sometimes you get wines and you open them up and it'll say Syrah, Cabernet, Zinfandel, or whatever, and you pour it and you taste it and you go, that doesn't taste like the wine I thought I was getting. But in this case, very balanced, a lot of fruit.
Yes. And in California, most
Ooh, yum.
most
no
new
oddball
wine
taste
drinkers
at all.
and intermediates want some fruit up front. They don't want to stretch it out to the back of the tongue and start identifying the cardboard and the sherry and the cocoa and the coffee. I mean, that's fun to
We'll
do.
bring
if
the
you want.
Psalms in for that,
If
okay?
you want to sit around with your friends and do that and get out a tasting chart and and a flavor chart and look for those, it's kind of fun to do.
It is, but
you
when you're
wanna host
just
a wine
enjoying
tasting.
it, you know,
But I have
sitting down at
friends-
dinner at night or having a glass out on the patio, this is a
Let me
a
tell you
yummy
the number
cab.
one thing I can say about Provenera in its bonnet, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
All of the customers that have moved away from the area and no longer have access to it at grocery outlet still stay in touch with me and begging me, can you find some way to ship, the wine to us in Texas and Louisiana and some others, and now out in Palm Desert. Although one of the ladies sent me an email the other day saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I still get your newsletter because now they've opened a store here in Palm Desert just down the road from me." So, however, the wines are a couple of dollars higher out there as you get farther away, and the transportation costs.
That's
are
the
higher.
industry. Regionality fits
And
into
I
the
should
picture.
probably,
so,
when I make mention that the prices that I'm mentioning here are all based on the LA market, they can be different.
Right,
Grocery Outlet currently is in California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, a couple of stores in Arizona, and I think a
Hey,
couple
that's
in
great because
Nevada
that
now,
means
too.
as we grow our downloaders, our audience. I'm used to talking in radio terms. So what do you do? Can we call you audience? Are you downloaders? Are you streamers? Are you? We'll have to come up with a proper name for the podcast folks. So. Hey, I'm new to this, and as I said, so I'm the host, Leroy Guilford. We're in the studio with Steve Guilford. Yes, there is a connection here. He's the wine guy before I was, and now we both kind of arm wrestle over who actually holds on to that title. But we'll let you decide as we sip through the wines.
If we really did that.
So we're headed towards the coup de grace here, which is the Xanthos. And that I kept going back and sipping. This is a real gutsy Cabernet Sauvignon. Talk about it. This is awesome.
Well, this is
what,
the
$18 you said at the
It's
store there?
$16.
$16.
It's the third vintage we've had of this wine. And while hard to believe, the previous vintage was even smoother than this, but I suspect this 2019 and another 6 months in the bottle, if cared, kept carefully, will probably get to that level. This one is 15%. They have varied over the last few vintages between about 14.9 and 15.3. This is 15, right? Almost right.
And I got to say to folks too, because when you start talking about that, it'll give you a little indication. When we're sipping this wine, at least for myself right now, if you like some big cab of tannins to lick off your teeth without being astringent, this has got it. This is, lots of times you buy a store-bought, high-volume brand Cabernet, and you're like, oh, dang, I could have had a V8, like the old commercial used to say, shucks. But in this case, man, I can guarantee you will not be disappointed because lots of times I like to have that cab that's got a little bit of bite, and this has got it.
It does indeed. And there were only 3,600 cases of this wine produced, so we have a lot of it because when I tasted it and saw how good it was, I hurried and ordered a few days later another 20 cases of it. So we still have about probably 10 cases of it left, maybe less than that, maybe down to 7 or 8 now. But still, if you don't mind spending $16 for something that if you went to a big wine store would have cost you $30 or $40.
Yes, that's pretty cool. So,
it's Oakville, Napa Valley, 2019. Xanthos is spelled with an X. Xanthos.
Like Xanadu. Remember the old movie? Yeah, skating around. So, all right, talk about if they want to sign up for your newsletter. Folks, I can tell you, yes, I get to taste all kinds of wines, interview all kinds of winemakers and everybody else, but guess what? I read my brother's newsletter because he's got some great stuff. And I like to run down to my local grocery outlet and see if it's as well stocked as his store. And occasionally, I call him up and he sets stuff aside so I can jump all
that-
the way to Long Beach. So wait a minute. Talk about your
one
specific
thing.
store.
That's
Folks
what I
wanted
was
to come
just
in,
gonna say.
at least those who are here in Southern California. Okay.
I even have
Yeah.
people that drive in from places like Palm Springs or
Right.
San
So
Diego.
you're
They
on
come by
7th
at our
Street
store.
in the heart of Long Beach, right? Close to
Yeah.
Cherry Avenue, right?
1340 East 7th Street. Yes, we're
Yeah.
between Walnut and Orange,
Walnut
or
and
between
Orange, that's
Cherry
it.
and Orange
Yeah.
if you want the
Right.
bigger streets. On the south side of the street, it used to be a Fresh and Easy, one of those. A number of those became grocery outlets later on. But what's different at my store from all of the others, at least here in our area, there may be some up in Northern California that are owned by or run by people that are more involved in wine and really have an appreciation for it. So
Wow.
what the big difference is, the wines in my store are all organized. When you buy something and you want to find something similar to it, it'll be stocked right near the one you bought before until it runs out, of course. Or if it's on one of our promotional islands. And a lot of things start out there, so we see how they appeal to people on the just look at it and grab.
Right.
And then they go on to the shelf. But I put little tags in front of all the ones that I reviewed and have determined to be worth more than what we're charging for them. I'm not saying it's the best of that or
Right.
the worst of that or anything like that, but
But they get
this-
some guidance if you're not
what
around.
it means
right?
is
Yes.
if you can only
No.
afford $5, this is going to be as good as you can get. And if you want to
Right
spend
on.
$12, look for one of my tags up there on a $10 or $12 or $15 wine, and you'll get something, that's comparable. But all of my wines are organized. My whole wall is covered with domestic wines, with an exception of putting all the Malbecs together,
Right.
California and Argentines mostly.
Now, that's not true in every one of the stores, as we know. But if
most
you
of
guys
the
have his
stores-
newsletter, you can go in and at least
find them.
spy out and find them, or at least ask the person who's running that wine
And up
department
till-
to order them in because they're available.
Well, they
yeah.
pretty much they'll have to have gotten them. Most of what I'm putting on there are going to be in all the stores at some time.
boy, yum.
Whether they last for a very long time will depend on whether they were clever enough to order a lot more of it. But you will find them at the stores. The problem is they're mostly are going to be stocked by people that are doing other groceries. And when a hole opens up on the wall where that Pinot Noir was, and here's a
Case of
a
whatever,
Chilean
right?
white blend may go in place of it, and
Right.
so it's maybe a little harder to find in some of the stores. But
So
they're
I'm going to
getting
suggest
better.
that folks, if you're
Well, let
here
me
in
finish.
Southern
Wait,
California-
wait, little
No,
brother.
no.
Let me finish one thing here.
Okay. Fire away, sir.
So the wall of domestics, and then I have 3 islands that are separated into a South American, Chilean, and Argentine. The other side of that is all French. Across from that is the Spanish and Portuguese. On the other side of that one is my Italian wines. And they're facing all the New Zealand and Australian wines, making it, if you have a penchant for something from the area or from your homeland or whatever, you can come in there and see if we have something, that's where it'll
See,
be.
now
and
you just
can
set
find
up
it.
what I was trying to
And
get to.
that's-
People should make a pilgrimage. Put it on your.
Oh, there you go.
You should make a pilgrimage to Long Beach.
Long Beach,
visit
7th Street.
visit the other wine guy, okay, and he'll walk you through the stuff you ought to fill up your case with. Because if you're only paying $5, $6, $7, $8 a bottle, you can
Well,
afford a
you-
case of some yummy wine. You know,
And you can save from that too, because every Wednesday we give 10% off on 12 or more. So I have about 50 regulars that I see probably 20 to 30 of each Wednesday coming in to fill up a box or two of assorted wines. And many, they know now what they like.
Right.
And they always want to know, okay, what else you got that you've had since I was here last? They always want to try something new.
Okay,
And-
we're going to wrap this out
right.
because I'm looking at, neat thing about podcasts, we don't have to run on an
Yeah,
exact
45
clock, but
minutes
we've been
is
here a
plenty.
while. All right, so talk
And you
about
just
how
wanna
to sign
drink
up.
more wine.
I do.
I know what it is.
Sign up. How do they sign up your newsletter again?
Send your name to VIP wine list. It says VIP, WINELIST, as it sounds, at gmail.com. Just include your name in the body, first and last name, and in the subject line put wine list. Or even if you don't put anything, I'll know what it's from. I can figure that out unless you give me a long message of something else. And you're welcome to send notes back on something you have an opinion that you loved or hated something. I always love, and somebody says, well, I hated it, so I didn't want to talk to you. I said, no, I really would love to know if you hated it, because then I'll look at what you like, and I know who else who likes those who not to promote wines to, because just I don't just promote wines to my customers based on what I like. I also listen to what everybody
what
comes
they
back
want.
and says what they liked, and I look at what else they've bought and what else they've liked, and I can get these profiles. And now when somebody says, can you recommend something? I'm in a hurry, I'm on my way to a dinner party, and I can give them something that's going to be the headliner of everybody that brought a bottle of wine to the table. And they come back and tell me that. And
Now,
they're
since you're
thrilled
talking
to
about
death.
liked, I'm going to jump in here and ask folks, if it turns out wherever you are catching us on the download here, as you heard, there's a lot of those stores all over the place here on the West Coast. When you go in, we're trying to get people to the Spill the Wine podcast. So we would love it if you went in there and said, I heard about you on the Spill the Wine podcast,
That certainly would
that
be
would
great.
be fun. Wouldn't that be fun? All right, so one last time, a little clink of the glasses. We got one last sip here to go. All right. No, you got to get it right in front of the microphone. But see, he's got to learn how to do radio here. So, excuse me, podcast radio. Okay.
I've done enough radio. All right. Anyway.
All right. Well, anyways, thank you everybody for tuning in, or in this case, downloading us this week.
And pour a glass and join us.
You've got it. It's the Spill the Wine podcast.